Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another round of Basis Picks. As always, please like and subscribe if you have a friend, a colleague, a relative, an associate, an enemy, any and all in between. It's appreciated. Now, I wasn't even really going to do this weekend. Me not being at the event as I was supposed to be took a little bit of the shine off of it for me. And look, as much as I think there's going to be a bunch of fun fights, it's not really a big card. So I don't know how much traction, how much attention the video may get. But that being said, look, I try to be as consistent as I can, regardless of whether, it's a full action-packed weekend, whether it's a quiet weekend, still try to get them done. Now, there are some other fights on this weekend. I know Rashidi Ellis is fighting, and a couple of other lesser known stars, but we're going to stick just to the Matchroom card. I'm only going to talk about 3 fights because I feel like all the other fights on there pretty much are developmental, introductory type. So yeah, we're going to go to the main card, the last 3 fights on the card, give you my picks, and hopefully, as I've done recently, according to some people, won them some money. So let's see. Without further ado, let's get into the picks. Okay, so first match to talk about has to be Conor Walker versus Liam Taylor. Now, I'm pretty well versed in Conor Walker and his style by now. Liam Taylor's a little bit more foreign to me. I've seen a couple of his fights, but I don't really know him too tough to be able to go into proper sort of breakdowns of how each guy, goes about their work. What I will say though is both guys are more come forward type opposition, so this won't be a Harry Scarf type situation where one person is having to try and track down and find the other. They're both gonna meet each other in the center of the ring. I don't think this one is ultimately going to come down to punch power. Like, Conor Walker doesn't have the biggest punch, but he has a certain volume that generally is capable of either overwhelming his opponent or keeping them honest. I still think that the fight between him and Crocker, I still think the fight between him and Crocker, he was robbed in that fight. But he's a British welterweight champion now. Obviously, Crocker and Donovan are going to be it looks like rematching for the vacant IBF strap at this point in time. So I don't see any reason why, if he can't beat Liam Taylor, he can't get that rematch up at world level. I'm sure as a voluntary it should be allowed, although I'm not sure that Crocker would want the fight if he was to win. Paddy Donovan, he may more be willing to take it, but look, I think Liam Taylor is going to possess the power to make Conor Walker more willing to keep his arms up and maybe keep the punch count a little bit more reserved than usual. However, the one thing I do think that does play into Conor Walker's favor, outside of obviously hometown advantage, is his engine, his work rate. Right now he's been able to go sort of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 rounds. He's very much a fighter at this point in time that's been able to navigate and learn how to navigate those rounds, how to really sort of ramp up the output when his opponent's starting to fade or when his opponent's starting to slow down. So you might see him start off slow-ish, competitive but slow, and then start to really ramp into it as the pace starts to quicken towards the end, when the opponent maybe starts to flag a bit. And that's kind of how I see this fight playing out. Now, I didn't expect the knockout of Harry Scarf last time. I thought he would win on a points decision. Clearly, after about round 6, 7, that no longer became an option. So we had to drag it out of the bag. Last minute, boom, and out. This one, I do think he's actually going to get the opportunities to be in the fight from the start. I think that Liam Taylor is going to sort of, I won't say dominate the first half, but I feel like he's going to be ahead and in control up to sort of like the 4th to 5th round. But I do think that Conor Walker will take over. just that extra pace, that extra grit and guile will see him through to the end of the bout. So my prediction will be that Conor Walker will win on points, either unanimous or split decision. I'm gonna go with a split, as I think it might be a fairly close run contest, but that's my prediction. Alright, next up, Peter McGreel versus Paluta. This fight obviously wasn't the fight we was expecting. We were supposed to be Shabazz Massoud against Peter McGreel. Now, I think that fight would have been a more interesting fight from a stylistic standpoint, but this fight I think has a bit more intrigue, a bit more jeopardy in it, and also outside of that there's a little bit of a rivalry because Paluta has already beat two of Peter McGreel's stablemates in what might be classed as upset victories. This is also now a Matchroom versus Queensberry bout, with Paluta obviously being a Queensberry representative fighter. Makes it a bit more interesting, a bit more spicy. Now, Peter McGreel, he's got good skills. Look, he was a good amateur. He fought all around the world, faced many different styles. He's got good footwork. I know the talks of him being like, I guess, a British Lomachenko were greatly exaggerated. Like, he's nowhere near those kind of levels, but he does have pretty good footwork. The problem with Peter McGreel is he doesn't always keep his hands where they need to be. His hands are always notoriously quite low, especially in striking range, and he relies on his footwork and his speed to almost be able to get in and evade punches by sort of shuffling out of the way. He doesn't have a lot of sort of good upper body movement. Like, again, a lot of it is about movement of the feet. Occasionally you'll get the arms up, but mostly every time I've seen him, he is sort of trying to rely on those reflexes. Now, we saw in the Jericho Quinn fight where that was not a problem. He was bossing the fight primarily. Yes, he was doing extremely well, but with those hands down, comes in at an angle, the wrong angle, gets caught, gets slept. The rematch never took place, but I've been seeing in other fights previous that some of those same tells are there. Now, Paluta is not the type of person to be able to fire off of an angle in that way, but what he does have is he has work rate, he has guile, he has a way to disrupt your rhythm and to stop you from being able to look silky and flashy. Hence the reason he's been able to beat a lot of these guys. He comes in at a very awkward off rhythm beat, but it's relentless. It's very much not pressure, but it's more ambush, but it's off of a rhythm whereby if you think of a 1-2 1-2 type step, as you hit the 1, he's already onto you. You don't even get the chance to get to 2. He's on you at that 1.125, and because of that moment, you're not really in that position that you want to be to get your rhythm down. And that's been the reason he's been able to have so much success, especially against certain styles of fighters. So someone with footwork like Peter McGreel, I think, could be very susceptible to that. Someone that actually has to be in that rhythm, has to be in his flow in order to get maximum opportunity and maximum output. So in this fight, I do think in the first couple rounds, Peter McGreel is going to try to establish dominance, especially again taking on some of his stablemates' woes as such, and trying to maybe avenge the gym. But I think that Paluta, his timing, his pace, one thing about him, he never gets disheartened. He always goes to the end. The losses that he's had, some of them have been extremely close. Again, he's upset the apple cart on numerous occasions to numerous prospects. So in his mind, he won't feel defeated. He'll go till the end thinking there's always a chance he can win. And in this actual scenario, look, I know it's a Matchroom show. It's Matchroom Queensberry. Matchroom are desperate for the win, but I'm going with the ballsy option here. I'm actually picking Paluta to score the upset victory. It won't be a KO, but I do think that he can hit McGreel hard enough that McGreel maybe gets a little bit gun shy. I'm not convinced about McGreel's chin. I've seen him caught with shots by lesser punchers than Paluta, who's not a big puncher at all, and I've seen him look frazzled, look a bit scared to get hit, especially after the Jericho Quinn fight. It would make sense, but I think that Paluta wins this fight. I think it might be a split decision. I think it will be a close one. A lot of his fights end up being split decisions, but I do think he will end up going 3-0 against the gym. Like I said, ballsy pick. It could backfire, but something tells me that Paluta's here to ruin the party, and I think he just might. Last but not least, we've got Galal Yafai against Francisco Rodriguez. Now, this is a very, very interesting and a very dangerous fight. Galal Yafai, I think, is 9-0 at this point in time. 9-0 with, I believe it's 6 KOs on his record. So look, he's come up. Look, his very first fight was a 10-rounder, so he's been sort of plugging away, taking the hard fights, the hard route from early. So he's definitely in line for that championship shot. He's earned that if he gets through this fight. Francisco Rodriguez, he's been in the ring with the likes of Kazuto Ioka. He's been in there with Kenshiro Taraji. He's been in there with Junto Nakatani. He's only ever lost to the upper echelon guys, former minimum weight unified champion. He's not going to be coming into this fight to lay down. Those Mexicans, especially from those lower weights, never do. It's going to be a very interesting fight. Here is where I think this fight is won and lost. Both of these guys are front foot, come forward fighters. There's no one's going to be circling the outside trying to pick their shots. They're going to go toe to toe. Galal Yafai only knows one way, that's to try and overwhelm his opponents with large volumes of punches, especially early on. Very good combinations. He's also very dirty with the forearms, and not so much the elbows, but the forearms, the framing, all stuff that you're not supposed to do. He doesn't get pulled up on it by the ref. I don't know if Rodriguez will necessarily make enough of a moan about it to the officials to make them watch him with a lot of that stuff. However, Rodriguez is also a guy that is not shy of taking the tactics to within the limits of the law if he needs to as well. So in that sense, it could be a pretty fun fight. The levels of experience in the pro side is vast. Rodriguez, I believe, is like 39-6 if I'm correct. I'm pretty sure, but they're both 32 years old. So obviously one's got a lot more, I guess, wear and tear in the pros. One's got a bit more wear and tear from the amateurs. But in terms of overall rounds and I guess overall matchups and levels of competition, Rodriguez is definitely of the highest class, and he probably will be the hardest fight of Galal Yafai's career. The thing that I look at in this fight though is both guys can punch. I think Rodriguez possibly hits harder one punch, but I think Galal's combinations, he's probably harder in combination. He's got a good engine and work rate in the first half of the fight, and I think that's where the key for this is going to be. Rodriguez, I feel, is going to have to acclimatize to the atmosphere, to the ring, to the environment, and it may take him sort of a couple rounds to try and get going. But in those minutes and in those moments, I feel as if Galal Yafai is going to overwhelm him, sort of big volume, to keep Rodriguez not necessarily holstered, but to basically limit the amount of output that he wants to throw, especially in sort of between rounds 1 to 3. I think he may sort of have a bit more output from about maybe the 4th round, 5th round, but this fight, I believe, gets very, very interesting from about 6 rounds on. One thing about Galal Yafai, as I said, he throws loads and loads of punches and combinations. They're not the heaviest of punches at all times, but he throws with a lot of intention. with that volume, with the footwork, with a lot of the jostling and maneuvering he likes to try and do on the inside, that all takes energy. And I've seen him noticeably on numerous times slow down in sort of the mid to second half of the fights that he's had that haven't, you know, stopped in a knockout. The ones that have gone the 10 rounds, the 10 round distance, he normally slows down 6, 7, 8, 9, and yes, he still throws punches, but nowhere near as aggressive, nowhere near as sharp, and nowhere near as tight. I think those are the moments where Rodriguez will actually be able to come into his own. Look, we all know those Mexican gas tanks are exceptional, especially at those lower weights. His punch output and his punch count will be consistent throughout the fight, and if anything, he may end up throwing more punches towards the back end of the fight than he does in the front half. And I think it's going to be a situation where Galal Yafai is having to not so much hang on, but he's having to now swim upstream and maybe try to stay in front. And I think in efforts of him trying to do that and realizing that his that maybe, you know, he is fighting against the tide and the tide is actually starting to come in, I reckon he would at that moment try and go for broke, to try and get Rodriguez out of there, saying that he doesn't want to go 12 rounds. 10 rounds, I reckon he might decide to coast from about 8, 9 onwards. But in a 12 round fight, he knows that he can't afford to coast for 4 rounds. And I think he's going to try and put pedal to the metal and take Rodriguez out. However, in doing so, I feel as if he may unleash a salvo, get really tired, and get caught on the exchange. Again, this is another ballsy pick. It's another controversial one, but there are no easy fights here for a reason. I think this is another upset, and I don't think it goes to points. I actually think that Francisco Rodriguez wins this fight via stoppage/knockout late. I'm talking about round 10 or 11, when Yafai has just basically expended as much energy as he's about to, hasn't got much left, can't really defend himself that well, maybe gets hit with something, either gets dropped, rocked, or ends up just being put in a salvo, maybe up against the ropes, and the referee decides to jump in, or he gets counted out. But either way, my official pick for this is Francisco Rodriguez to win via stoppage TKO around about 10 or 11. Again, ballsy pick, but having seen both of them and the way that they fight, the styles that they fight, and the like I said, the lack of I guess conditioning that Yafai has after about rounds 5, 6, 7, 12 round. I think this is his second 12 rounder, but it's only the first time he's really likely going to go to those really later rounds. That's just all I can kind of see. I can't get it out of my head. So that is the prediction. Francisco Rodriguez to win via stoppage rounds 10 to 11. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you very much for watching. We probably will do a watch along for the last 3 fights of the card, so starting about 8:30. So yeah, make sure you like, subscribe, tune into that watch along, and I'll catch you then. But for right now, Spaces Picks locked.